Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. Joining us today, we have Craig Klein from SalesNexus. Here's the deal with contact relationship management. That's what we're going to talk about today. This is a little bit off the beaten path, but not so far. You've heard me talk about technology before. And if you remember, if you've been following this show for a little while, you saw Andrew Ridow join us from Liberation Tech. And we talked a great deal about technology and security protocols and all that stuff in the context of freedom economy. So today, Craig, can you tell us about the origins of SalesNexus? What, at a high level, for anybody who may not be familiar with contact relationship management, what it is, how it works, and what you've built?
Sure. Well, thanks, Jonathan. Appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come on the show. Customer or CRM, contact relationship management, customer relationship management, 6 of one, half a dozen the other. But basically, it's the idea of managing the relationship with your customers or contacts or subscribers or members in a database so you can organize things. And my background's in sales. I spent most of my early career selling or managing, hiring and managing salespeople. Built a couple of sales teams in the energy business for some service companies. And, I found that I needed a tool like that to keep track, to help my salespeople make sure they're staying on top of the right accounts, right? And so about 20 years ago now, the company I worked for last they were acquired. And so I had acquired a little bit of equity in the company. So I had a little bit of a windfall, and I decided, you know what, now's the time if you're going to do it. And I really felt like we could build a better mousetrap. So that's when we started SalesNexus. And the idea was to make a CRM that gives management the tools that they need, the visibility, the tracking capabilities, the metrics, et cetera, but also works the way a salesperson works, because all these systems can have great capabilities, but if the salespeople don't like using it, then you don't get much information, and that undermines the entire exercise. So that was our original plan.
Well, that makes sense to me. I have a couple of questions, and I'm going to set this up in what's probably a humorous sort of way. As people may guess by the silver hairs on my head, as I gray a bit, I go back to file cards. I remember early in my career, we actually had kids, plug your ears, this is going to be shocking to you, but we actually had little paper cards, and we would write with a pen. Old school, I know that probably sounds like chiseling on stone tablets to a lot of people.
Yeah, in a little plastic box, right? And you would sit there and go through them.
Yep. And I still get called out for using the term Rolodex. So I've seen and actually had and used a Rolodex, which was little cards, and we would look through them. But we have evolved very, very far from that. And I remember back when Microsoft Outlook first came out, and it gave the ability to add notes. And boy, was it just awful. It was so cumbersome to open up a file and type somebody's name in, Jane Smith and whatever, and then right click and add a note that a phone call took place, and then you add some phone notes. And people pretty quickly figured out that that was really clunky. And so stuff rolled out back in the 90s to make that process a little bit easier. And I've tried and adopted a number through the years. But Craig, it seems now the latest and greatest incorporates all kinds of stuff to make it super streamlined and easy, including, and I would like you to get into this, to whatever extent your offering integrates with social media, with newsletter campaigns, emails, and just kind of the look and feel of it, because I know you're putting a lot into the user experience.
Yeah, everything's evolved quite a lot, and it's funny because now what I see a lot of demand for, what people are looking for, is automation to the extent that they never have to talk to a customer, right? Which I get it. You know, there's some businesses where that makes sense, right? But to me, the fun part of business is the people, right? And getting to know them and building relationships and having customers for years and years and years. So our target market has always been B2B sales teams, where you need to build a relationship with your customer. And really the key function of a system like ours is to just have everything in one place, so that if you call me up out of the blue and I haven't talked to you in 6 months, I don't need to put you on hold while I go through my Rolodex and my notes on my notepad and whatever, right? I can just at a glance, oh yeah, I remember Jonathan. We talked about this, that, and the other thing. Hey, Jonathan, how's Susie, your wife, or whatever, you know, have all the data that I need to know about you right there. Emails, proposals I sent, whatever. That's the vision. And, you know, now you can use all of that information and, you know, automatically be sending the right email to the right customer based on what you've learned about them, right? You tell me that you like, you know, vacation homes in the mountains, and then another customer tells me that they like vacation homes on the beach, and you're each getting different kinds of emails from me, but I didn't have to go manually make that decision or create those emails or anything.
Awesome.
So it can get really easy and automatic, so that the sales rep can really just go, right? And you can maximize the amount of time that you're spending building relationships instead of all the paperwork and stuff.
It seems like there's sort of a lost art to that client engagement, but I think I'm predicting
not entirely lost, but
I'm predicting it's kind of coming back a little bit. I think we've had a generation, or at least I shouldn't say generation, a period of years where people have sort of fallen into slightly lazier habits, maybe just meeting online. But that whole idea of knowing somebody's birthday, and just as a point of reference, actually 2 days ago, I had a message pop up on my screen. Somebody I haven't talked to in probably 10 years. A birthday message popped up that this person's birthday was 2 days ago. And I just, on a whim, I just called and left a voicemail and said, I haven't talked to you in a long time. A little message popped up. I hope you're having a great birthday. Those are the kinds of things I think that pay off. And knowing the right message to deliver to whom and when is mission critical. But as we talked about when I launched UnWoke.Academy, and we drilled down and looked into one of the big ones that I actually covered in great detail was those virtual digital signature things, like DocuSign is an example of one that's used regularly. Well, I found that I personally am not comfortable with DocuSign because of the way that they built their technology. It seems a little bit, well, actually, in my book, kind of a lot creepy and invasive. But knowing and having the ability to talk to you directly, the person who designed and built this your way, can you talk a little bit about what you've put in on the tech side to not be creepy and data mining and invasive?
Yeah, it's a good question. And, you know, we've been doing this for 20 years, and most of that time, I wasn't concerned about such things at all. It just never really crossed my mind because it was never part of our business model. You know, but then during COVID, when the whole world went insane, we were, at that time, we were using AWS for, you know, hosting all of our servers and applications and all that. And if you remember, AWS shut down Parler, which was, you know, the growing social media app at the time. I just decided right then and there, you know, I was writing, you know, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 checks every month to AWS for all their services, right? And I just couldn't, in good conscience, keep doing that. And if that, you know, if that's the way they're going to treat their customers, so we made a decision to find a different vendor. But without getting into all the technical details, AWS has a way of wheedling its way into your infrastructure like a spider like a spider web, so that extricating yourself is extremely difficult. So it took us about a year and a half. It took us a year and a half to, number one, find a vendor we could that we could trust. And that wasn't going to just call me up one day and go, hey, we don't like what this customer over here of yours is sending out. You need to shut them down. Right. And then also we had to re-engineer our back end so that we weren't dependent on AWS, number one, but also so that we could, commit to our customers that you're not going to be spied on. We're not going to share your data with anybody else. That was always our business practice, but we wanted to be able to also say at a technical level, we have put this thing in a vault that nobody's going to get to, and so, like I say, it took a year and a half. It was a lot of money, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and all that. But we got it done. And since then, we've been specifically marketing SalesNexus to people in the freedom economy, nonprofits of a conservative bent. And what's been mind blowing is the stories that I've heard from, these great people that have started these nonprofits in the last few years, just out of passion, right? And it's just they're doing it all on a shoestring. They don't have a lot of money or donors or anything like that. And they're wearing 16 different hats, and they're using something like MailChimp to send out their, weekly newsletter or something. And then all of a sudden, boom, MailChimp just shuts them down and says, no, you can't do that anymore. Yep. We don't want your business. And what's terrible about that is, I get that. Sometimes you do have to tell a customer, I don't want to do business with you anymore, right? But the way I've always done business is you pick up the phone and you call that customer and say, hey, I have a little trouble with what you're doing with my platform. Can we maybe make a change? And if we can't, can I help you go do business with one of my competitors, right? But one way or the other, I'm going to try and be helpful in that transaction. What the big tech folks have been doing is just arbitrarily shutting people down with no warning and no help, and they're just stuck on an island, and it's costly to those people. These are people that have, maybe put their careers on hold, and they're bankrolling this operation out of their own pocket, and their lifeblood is sending out that email asking for donations, right? And all of a sudden they can't.
If you didn't know, that's a little side. I don't think this came up, Craig. You may not know this, but during COVID, on behalf of my wife, who is a heart failure patient, I found myself in some chat groups on the social media platform LinkedIn and engaged in some conversation with some clinical technicians and medical researchers and doctors who were talking about the heart implications of the jab. Right. Well, at that time, I had spent a lot of time building up a presence on LinkedIn, and I was actually paying for something called Sales Navigator, right, which is a kind of a CRM-ish component to LinkedIn. Right. I think it was $880 a year I was paying for the thing, and I built all kinds of stuff around it, and I had all of my stuff, all of my sales, my client contacts, years of communications with clients, all going through LinkedIn, because when I liked it, I really liked it. And they just shut me off overnight. I'm the lifetime banned. I have no LinkedIn profile. I tried like 4 times to go back, and I have no profile. So that's an example of exactly what we're talking about. If somebody were to establish their business's customer relationship management software around one of those firms, and I applaud you for figuring that out about AWS, they're treacherous and awful, and extricating yourself from them. But if just envision, even as a small business or a good sized business with a whole bunch of sales staff, if all of a sudden your information just evaporates, or you have to take and download and then rebuild that somewhere else simply because, fill in the blank, you were outed as conservative, or somebody in your business posted a Christian meme or something. For heaven's sakes, right. It's gotten really, really bad. And knowing that you're building what you're building and making available to us a CRM that is designed not to do that. And just one other analogy for the sake of my audience, I've talked a great deal about It's Old Glory Bank. Now, of course, they're also in finance, so I point out that there is no affiliation, no connection. It just happened to be a bank that caught my awareness and interest because they tout themselves to be uncancelable. When we get into the discussion about being canceled, debanked, or deplatformed, I am all about looking at places like SalesNexus and Craig's offering, because as we build this freedom economy, or some people like to say parallel economy, we need to build it in a way that has legs, that they can't rug pull us. So thanks for letting me interject that.
Sure.
I
agree.
What's the vision for the future?
Well, AI, of course, is a big part of every technology company's future. And we have plans around that I think are going to be really cool. But to your point, what we're trying to do differently is, rather than leveraging these, what's the right way to, these public or big tech owned AI models like ChatGPT or Google's Gemini or whatever, right? Which they all have their API, and it's easy for developers like us to tap into that and use their AI to enable cool features in our software, right? But that just leads us right down the same old road that we were on with AWS. Sooner or later, Google or any vendor like that is not going to like what one of our customers is doing, and they have the ability then to shut it down, for no good reason, right? So what we're doing is building our own, what they call LLMs, large learning modules. So the AI is ours, or I shouldn't even say that, it's our customers, right? So instead of you putting your customer data into the system and our AI that was trained on other companies trying to respond to your customers the way you would, right? Which is, it'll work to an extent, but it's never going to speak with your voice, right? What we're going to do is we're going to learn from your data so that your AI speaks with your voice organically, right? And if you need to move it, take it somewhere else, move it to another vendor, it's yours. And you can take it with you, which, back to your point earlier, I would say for anybody using any kind of platform, like even Twitter, right? There was a period of time not too long ago when Twitter was shutting a lot of people down, right? And sort of demonetizing a lot of people and all of that. And we were hearing from a lot of them because the problem that they all had, you might have, hundreds of thousands of followers on Twitter or X, but that's your only way to connect with them is via Twitter. You don't have their phone number, you don't have their mailing address, and you don't have their email address, right? So the point is, it doesn't matter what business you're in, nonprofit, for-profit, whatever, one way or the other, even if you are using social media a lot, you have to have some strategy to own that relationship that's independent of any platform, that has to be part of your overall mission, and I think that social media has made it so easy to ignore that a lot of people got caught.
Like Parler.
Right. Yeah.
It's a great example. I was one of those. I was excited about Parler.
Yeah.
I'd only recently actually started to pay any real attention to Facebook, and I just saw how depraved that environment could be. I got excited about Parler and went over there, and that was a total rug pull.
Mm-hmm.
I had a profile, I had people I was starting to connect with, and then suddenly one day it was just off, disappeared, it was gone.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the things that we in the freedom economy can't afford to let happen. So, Craig, give us the website and tell us that. So there's a demo. People can jump in on the website and give it a try, right?
Right. Yeah. You can start a free trial and you can sign up for a demo. We'll do a one-on-one demo with your team so you can ask your specific questions and all that good stuff. You just go to salesnexus.com.
SalesNexus.com. I'll put that up in the show notes. Everyone can follow through and check the website. What else is this? Is this your singular passion, Greg?
Well, yes, I guess it's changed a little bit since, like I say, since COVID. We've kind of made this pivot in our market, our target market. And what I've been through my own, sort of reawakening, if you will, as a result of that, in that one of the things I learned over the last few years is that I had always lived my life with, kind of my business world and my personal life and my spiritual life were sort of two different things. You didn't bring your spiritual beliefs to work, right? That's the way I was raised and trained in business. And, what I've learned over the last few years is that was a terrible mistake. And so what we're trying to do now is develop content, training, and other things to help sales organizations in particular understand that the best practice as a salesperson, so you can go back, 50 years and read sales books from people like Og Mandino and all the Zig Ziglar and all the old greats, right? And if you really think about it, the principles that they're teaching are Christian principles. They're just not calling it that, right? They're caring for their customer and trying to find out what their customer really needs and help them find, solutions that they need, right? So what we're trying to do now is create materials to help people understand what they do as a salesperson in that spiritual light, so that they're not just showing up asking the customer for the order, but maybe in some cases when it's appropriate, maybe you're even saying a prayer with your customer at the beginning of a meeting, or when they place their first big order and it's a big risk for them. There's all kinds of great opportunities to connect through God with your customers if you're just not afraid to share it.
Awesome. That's really well put. And a few things kind of showed up for me. One is, through all of my years in business, I've had a few occasions where I've seen personally or I've witnessed a salesperson make the decision that they or their product or their offering wasn't the best for the customer. And to have the wherewithal and the fortitude that to me has resonated and struck me several times. When somebody's able to go in and put some effort into a sales opportunity and then realize there's some competitor that might be a better fit, and tell the client, that potential prospect, that to me is absolutely a biblical principle. That is somebody putting the needs and interests of somebody else ahead of yourself. So I love that, and I applaud that element of it. The other, and this is just sort of for fun, I have somebody that I worked with many years ago as a kind of a mentor, made the comment to me that there are two types of salespeople. There are elephants and alligators. Elephants are all ears and alligators are all mouth. So it does seem like there are lots of people out there in the sales world. Not that CRM is only for salespeople. Lots of people use contact relationship management for various different purposes, but it generally seems to be talked about in the realm of helping to manage, grow, monitor, and facilitate the sales process. So anyway, therefore we're talking about this. But back to elephants and alligators, it seems that the people who are the best listeners often are the best at empathy and
Sure.
creating a good work relationship and sales environment.
Yeah. Well, and what you said earlier about, when a customer is not a good fit, to be honest with them and tell them that, what that does that's so powerful is it creates trust, right? At the end of the day, in a B2B situation where long-term relationships are valuable, trust is currency, right? And, so back to the same thing. If you are showing up and being your best self as a Christian, you're going to naturally create trust with your customers. And, sometimes that means short-term loss, right? I don't think this is the best fit for you. I think you should go over there and buy that. But that customer is going to be back because they trust you.
Yep. They're going to remember that. So one of the things that came up in our conversation on the phone a few days ago when we were introduced is some of your intention to customize and tailor your offering to specific markets. And you mentioned finance, because I work in finance. And I think we probably make a good demographic, a good target market for contact relationship management, because, well, it really, any of the specialties is going to have a specialized niche, like doctors or accountants or those of us who work in finance. Can you tell us about any progress you've made in those endeavors and future intentions?
Sure. Well, there's some really neat things going on, again, kind of related to this freedom economy concept. There's some people that I've had the opportunity to work with that are introducing new training programs for financial advisors to teach them about alternative investment strategies that involve more things like precious metals and less just, hey, let's spread your money out amongst various funds that BlackRock and Fidelity offer, right? And so working with those folks, some of them have become customers of SalesNexus. I've learned enough to be dangerous about that business. And, there's the same things that we've already talked about in terms of, protecting your data, making sure that it's not being spied on, it's going to be rented or sold, et cetera. Those are very important in that industry specifically. There's regulatory requirements for all of that. And also, one of the things that our system's always done well is integrating in other data sources. So today, what you can do with SalesNexus is if I have somebody's email address, but I don't know their phone number or even what company they work for or whatever, I put in their email and it'll give me all that missing information, right? Well, there's tools out there that do the same thing, but from a financial point of view. So it was super powerful, obviously, for a financial advisor, but also powerful for a nonprofit. So if I'm a nonprofit and I have people signing up to subscribe to my newsletter, then, at the end of the month, when 100 people have subscribed, I might like to look through that list and decide and have a ranking of, here's the people that frequently make large donations to other charities. Those are the people I probably need to pick up the phone and call and ask for a donation. In a financial advisor setting, it can be more specific, right? Like, this person owns a lot of real estate versus this person has a lot of money in the stock market or the bond market or whatever. So that's kind of the direction that we're heading. Although that financial information, that's not something that we've implemented yet. We're working on it. Gotcha.
Well, I pledge to help you where I can. I know a fair amount about that, as I mentioned in a phone call. So I think I may be able to help you as you build that. I'm going to mention, for anybody that may be tuning into this episode and hear our conversation and hear reference to BlackRock and Vanguard, State Street, and whatever, the typical investments, go back about 2 weeks ago and watch the episode that I did on the globalist bubble. I really think that everybody should watch that episode. It's important for everybody to be aware of that. And then if you're at all interested in those of us who try and read the tea leaves about where things are headed with this, whatever you want to call it, the globalist push, we did 5 episodes on a gentleman by the name of David Rogers Webb, who did a book called The Great Taking. It talks about some interesting things. I think you should go back and watch those. It's a little bit off topic here, but since Craig, you mentioned BlackRock and a couple of other names, I wanted to interject that stuff for our listeners.
Yeah.
one of the things, so going back again sort of to the basics, and my original experience with CRM was really mostly along the lines of it would pop up with a reminder and let me know when somebody's birthday was. And I mentioned an example. It's in my queue and stays there, and every year it pops up. And it also eventually, I remember being excited when it integrated with email, and I could just click on their profile and it opened up an email. And cool, and streamlined. We've gone eons since then. But as far as sort of bringing in and aggregating different sources, do you now, or are you considering bringing in kind of all those different social media? So I'm, of course, not on LinkedIn. Other people are and still like it. Is there a component of SalesNexus that integrates with or allows kind of a flow through to LinkedIn and places like it?
Well, we don't really sort of replace the use of those platforms, but like I mentioned earlier, when we enrich a record, a customer record with that missing information, one of the things that we pull in is links to all their social profiles. So you can easily jump over to their LinkedIn or their X or Facebook or whatever.
Awesome. I love it. That's something that I can tell you in my contacts is sorely lacking. Back eons ago, it seems like another lifetime. Traveled the country. I crisscrossed the country, and I had the excellent fortune of working in a job that paid to fly me all over the country in rental cars and hotels. And I loved it for a while, and then it got old.
Yeah.
But out of that, I have a contact list. Actually, it needs to be updated. It's around 15,000 people that I've met through my career. But a lot of that is, I'm sure, it's gotten old, it's gotten stale. So taking advantage of things like SalesNexus that's able to streamline the updating of that information and update when they've changed and they have a new job and everything instead of manually, that's a lifesaver.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know, you move from career to career, right? And so, you know, in your previous career, you built up all these great relationships, and now you're 2 or 3 chapters on in your life, right? And you think to yourself, wow, all those people I used to know in that other business, I really should reach out to them about this new opportunity. But they've also moved on to new careers and new email addresses and everything else, right? So, you know, it almost seems like all that information you have is worthless, but actually you can run it through a tool like this and restore a lot of that or update it to the newest information.
I think I just set a plan for myself for the next several days. I've got a big database that needs to be updated. And every once in a while, I'm thankful when I come across a name of somebody that I'm trying to reconnect with and I have a mobile number, because those usually people don't easily give up their mobile number. But I've had several opportunities where I call somebody on their mobile number and I'll mention something like, I remember, you know, I don't know if you remember me, but we met when you were working at such and such. And there'll be this long pause like, oh, yeah, wow, that was a long time ago. I remember working for that company. I've moved 5 times since, and now I'm in Missouri or something. You know, it's like I wouldn't know if it weren't for that mobile number. But having that tech, having the ability to more readily stay in contact with people, that sounds spectacular.
Yeah, yeah. So this tool that we use to do that, it monitors the LinkedIn profile of all the people, contacts. And so, you know, if you think about it, you move careers, you're going to go and update your LinkedIn profile, one of the very first things, right? So we see that, and that's how we know, okay, we got to update the contact information for this person. And so, you know, that can be super powerful. And that technique that you just described is so, it's such a difference maker, right? When, especially in a sales role, but in any kind of role, you're reaching out to people and they're getting calls from all kinds of vendors trying to sell them this, that, and the other thing all day, every day. But you're the one that remembers, right? 10 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever it was, hey, I remember when you worked for so-and-so and you were in Chicago or wherever, just the little details, right, that set you apart from everyone else because you obviously, there was a relationship there. At least that's the way those little data points indicate a relationship that anybody else ringing their phone that day isn't going to be able to do.
There's a hint to any of our younger audience who might be listening. The more detail that you have, the better. In my career, I've found that if I have a conversation with somebody, if they let me know that they've gone through some change or transition in work or something traumatic happened, like they fell, or even a great event, like they finally got to go on that cruise they've always dreamt of, or go and visit Greece or something. I actually make notes of those things and have through my whole career. And then I find in really interesting ways, it comes back again in conversation. And so
sure,
I'm old school. I admit that. I often skim through my notes and stuff, things I've jotted down before making a phone call. So when I call, even years later, I might reference back to that. Like I remember last time you and I spoke 10 years ago, and you took that trip to Greece and everything. And then suddenly you're building bonds, you're building connection more than just some name calling, somewhat out of the blue. And
right. You mentioned earlier empathy, right? Which for sure, all the great salespeople have a very high level of empathy. But to me, the measuring stick of empathy, the best I've found anyway, is how much information can they retain from those conversations, right? It's one thing to teach a new salesperson. You need to ask a lot of questions and be the the elephant in your elephants and alligators analogy from earlier, right? You want to listen a lot. You want to ask questions and listen to what the customer has to say. But that's not the end of the story, right? You can listen, and I can nod my head and say, oh, that's very interesting, Jonathan. But if I'm not retaining the little details that you're sharing with me, and I can't come back next week in our next meeting and call back to those things to demonstrate that I did listen and retain that information, then it's really not accomplishing the goal. But when I do show up and do that and say, remember last week you were telling me about this, that, and the other thing, and reference specific details and things like that, man, that changes everything. I guarantee you, anytime you do that, your prospect, the person you're meeting with, you're going to get a look, right? Because it's so unusual today in this day and age for people to do that. And it just really sets you in a whole different league.
Absolutely. So I actually don't know the answer to this. So hopefully I'm not painting you into a corner or creating any more undue work for you. But in today's era with smartphones, that information is only so useful if you can't access it on the go. Do you have an app or plans for one?
No, we do. And yeah, you can do exactly that. Like, that's the whole idea, is like when I'm walking into a meeting with you, I can pull you up on my phone, and instead of just seeing your name and your phone number and your address and all the generic stuff that any app would give you, in your business, you might want to walk into a meeting and see, how much do they have in their IRA and what's their portfolio allocation and things like that. Details that you need to know about your customers that I don't need to know about my customers, right?
Oftentimes, personally, what I find is more immediately needed and relevant is the names of people around the person I'm meeting with. So oftentimes, if I'm going into a business meeting, knowing the name of somebody's assistant or the secretary, the security guard, or a family member, their spouse or children, if they're present, sometimes those can escape memory, and having CRM and being able to pull it up even in your car behind the wheel before you put your car in park, or actually, after you put your car in park, safety first, and before you go into the building, to skim through And then you can walk in and say, hey, Craig, great to see you. Is your wife Cindy around? No offense, man, I don't know your wife's name. Are your kids, are Bobby and Linda here, and the dog's name, and all those kinds of things? They help to build rapport. And those are the kinds of things that you'll hear and pick up, but not necessarily retain, especially if a couple of months or a year or more goes by before your next visit. That,
right,
to me, that's where CRM is a godsend.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's those little details that most people don't pay attention to. Every salesperson pays attention to what products do you buy and how much do you spend on those products, right? It's not that. It's the other things that aren't directly relevant to the sale.
Yeah. Well, we are almost out of time here. Craig, thanks again for joining us. Anything you want to say as a closing remark?
Well, going back to what you brought up in the beginning about the freedom economy and all of that, we about a year ago, we put together a guide that we call the Guide to Leaving Big Tech. And what we did is we just put together a list of all the most common things that we are all depending on, like Gmail and Google and so on and so forth. And for each of those things, we've got some selected alternatives that we've vetted and some specific instructions on, hey, if you're using Gmail and you want to move to a more private email platform, but you don't want to lose all that history of all those emails, here's some options that make that easy. So if you go to salesnexus.com, you can get a copy of that guide.
I did actually peruse your website, but I missed that one. That's really good. I think I'm going to use that to tease this episode to our listening audience. Craig, thank you very much again for joining us. And of course, as always, if something occurs to you, you have a question related to this, you can certainly, absolutely go to the website. If there are questions that I can help answer, get them to me. I will try and get them to Craig and get questions answered. Please do add them to the comments at the bottom, because who knows, other people might have the same questions. But as it relates to building technology to support the freedom economy, hat tip to Craig and the folks over at SalesNexus. Thanks again, Craig.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's been a